There are hospitals in the UK where treatment wasn't the only concern. Because inside places like these, patients weren't always treated well. Some were isolated for years. Some were never discharged. And others were simply left behind. But what people report now is something more unsettling than history alone. Encounters that feel targeted, not random. One nurse allegedly saw a child standing in a corridor. Moments later, she was found dead. No cause, no explanation. And in these buildings, people don't just see things. They report being pushed, dragged, stopped from leaving. So the question isn't, are these places haunted? It's this. What's still inside, and why doesn't it want people there? These are 5 UK hospitals where the past hasn't settled. Newsham Park Hospital. Built in 1874, originally as an orphanage, it later became a hospital and psychiatric facility. A place designed to care for vulnerable children. But like many institutions of its time, the reality wasn't always gentle. Records from that era suggest strict discipline and environments where children were often isolated. Today, the building is abandoned. But visitors report something very specific. Not just noise, but interaction. There's the well-known account, a nurse working late. She sees a child standing alone in a corridor, still, silent. She approaches, and the moment she gets closer, the child disappears. Moments later, she collapses in the same corridor and later died. No visible injury. No confirmed cause. Since then, people visiting the building report something else. Not just seeing figures, but being reacted to. One group described hearing something run past them, then feeling a sudden force from behind.
Did you hear that? Just the wind, probably.
Another described being pushed, not aggressively at first, but firmly enough to knock them off balance. And in multiple accounts, people describe the same feeling. That whatever is inside is aware of where they are. And if that building feels like it's watching, the next one feels like it's still holding people inside. Denbigh Asylum. Opened in 1848, Denbigh was one of the largest psychiatric hospitals in Wales. At its peak, it held far more patients than it was designed for. Overcrowding became a defining issue. Patients spent years inside. Some spent their entire lives there. And like many asylums of its time, treatments and conditions have long been debated. Today it stands empty, but the atmosphere hasn't changed. Visitors describe something specific here. Not silence, not emptiness, but movement, not distant. Not faint, immediate. One account describes footsteps, fast, closing in, echoing down a corridor toward a group. They ran. But one person felt it. A sudden impact to the back, enough to push them forward. Another report describes something more unsettling, being grabbed. Not violently, but enough to stop movement entirely. And what makes Denbigh stand out is how often people describe the same pattern. They enter calmly. They leave urgently. And if Denbigh feels like something is chasing people, the next location feels far more controlled. Opened in 1866, Stonehouse Hospital began as a military hospital. Later it became part of a psychiatric institution. Like many hospitals of that era, it housed patients long-term. Some records suggest extended confinement, with limited movement and strict routines. Today, the site has been partially redeveloped, but reports persist. Unlike the previous locations, this one doesn't rely on chaos. It feels controlled. One account describes entering a room alone. The door closed behind them, then locked from the inside. Another describes a sensation of being held in place. Not restrained physically, but unable to move for several seconds. Then released. No visible cause. No explanation. And if Stonehouse feels controlled, the next hospital feels unpredictable. Opened in 1896, Whitecroft operated for nearly a century. Closing in 1992, it treated psychiatric patients on an isolated island. Isolation matters, because when something is cut off, it doesn't just fade, it lingers. Visitors describe Whitecroft as reactive, not passive. One account describes being pushed suddenly in a corridor, hard enough to make them stumble. Another describes objects moving, but not falling, thrown. And a recurring report, people feeling drawn further inside, as if something is guiding movement. Not aggressively, but deliberately. And that raises the question, what happens in places where people are left alone for too long? Our next hospital is possibly the most disturbing, just because whatever or whoever lingers there isn't historical, it's recent. Towers Hospital opened in 1907. It closed in 2013, making it one of the most recent on this list. That matters, because the memories here are not distant. They're recent enough to feel real. Visitors report a consistent feeling that they are not alone, not metaphorically. Literally, footsteps, movement, presence, then escalation. One account describes hearing something run behind them. They turned. Nothing. Then they felt impact from behind. Another describes a whisper, close enough to feel it, not heard across a room, but right beside them. And the pattern is always the same. People don't stay long. They leave early. Not because they plan to, but because something changes. These hospitals were built for care. But over time, they became places of containment. And whether the stories are fully explainable or not, the reports continue. Not just sightings, but interaction. Because the most unsettling part isn't what people see. It's what seems to respond. If you were standing inside one of these hospitals tonight, and something noticed you, would you still be in control of the situation? Or would you be part of the environment now? If you enjoyed this video, please press the like button, and the hype button would be great too. I'd also be really grateful if you could subscribe, so I can bring you more accounts of the creepiest hauntings and abandoned places from around the UK and further afield too. For now, thanks for watching. See you in a bit.